Texas A&M ran into a ball saw tonight against South Carolina. And this was a game that Mike Elko knew was going to be really difficult for the Aggies. He was saying how this was a scary team. It's tough to win on the road and any matchup when you go up against an SEC team. But playing on the road against South Carolina is a really tough place to play. And we saw Mike Elko's nightmare come true when the Aggies, on their first offense possession, you're already down 7-0, and you go for it on 4th and 1 from your own side of the field on the 34-yard line. You get stopped, and then that 7-0 slow start, you get out 2 turns into a 14-0 slow start that you have to dig yourself from up out of. And they were able to come back and make this a tie ball game going into halftime. It was 20-20, but in the second half, all hell just broke loose for Mike Elko and company. And let's talk about what went wrong for Texas A&M in this upset loss, because I feel like when you got stopped on 4th and 1, that's when you kind of had a good feeling how this game was about to go, because after that, Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders, I don't know if they had some Texas A&M repelling on them, but nobody on that defense wanted to tackle these dudes. Lenore Sellers had the best game of his collegiate career up to this point, 244 passing yards, 106 rushing yards, 3 total touchdowns. He just couldn't be stopped. The Texas A&M pass rush that looked so good last week against LSU, they were a non-factor in this game. Not because they weren't getting pressure on Lenore Sellers, but they couldn't get this brother down to the ground. The dude was making everybody look foolish out there. And Rocket Sanders, he had 144 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. He also did a little bit of damage in the passing game. He was averaging 7.2 yards per pop. A&M's defense, they were just allergic to tackling these two guys, man. Anytime they gave it to Lenore Sellers or Rocket Sanders, it was always something good happening for the Gamecocks, and it meant bad news for A&M's defense. And the thing that I have noticed about Texas A&M from watching them play this year is that this is a team that kind of is a little bit dependent on turnovers. When they came back against LSU, they forced 3 interceptions from Gary Nussmeier. Well, tonight, South Carolina only had 1 turnover, and A&M was on the losing end of the turnover battle. And another thing that hurt A&M is that offensively, you didn't have the same level of intensity as you had in the second half against LSU. Marcel Reed, he got neutralized tonight. He only got held to 46 rushing yards. He had 1 touchdown, an interception that looked like a pick six. It didn't look like the dude stepped out of bounds to me. And it just wasn't a good night, not only for Marcel Reed, who got put in check, but the offensive line, they struggled. They gave up 3 sacks. They were allowing a lot of chaos to happen behind the line of scrimmage. And they also lost their best player, their running back, Lavian Moss, who got injured early in this game. He is the team's leading rusher. He's their most dynamic player on offense. And just playing on the road in South Carolina, you can tell, definitely rattled this team. This wasn't the same effort that we saw last week against LSU. And South Carolina, with Shane Beamer being their head coach, it was really easy to scoff over this game and make it seem like A&M was going to dominate this team. But what oftentimes doesn't get talked about enough about South Carolina is how this is a team that has one of the best defensive lines, not just in the SEC, but in all of college football. And one thing that we know about the game of football today is that it doesn't matter how questionable your quarterback play may be. If you can win up front, you can win on any given Saturday. And we saw that tonight with Texas A&M going down to South Carolina. This defensive line that they have with Dylan Stewart and company, there's something different. And when you can't block these guys up front, you're going to be in for a really tough game. And that's what makes South Carolina such an unpredictable team, because one week they could look really bad, get blown the hell out, and then another week they could shock you because their defensive line is causing a lot of chaos behind the line of scrimmage. They're tackling guys for loss. They're stopping your mobile quarterback. Remember, when South Carolina lost to Alabama, they really should have won that game. And they did a really good job of keeping Jalen Milroe in check. So if you got a mobile quarterback and you go up against South Carolina with how good their pass rushers are and the amount of pressure that they're able to not just generate on the edge, but up front as well, it's really tough for a guy that has the skill set of Marcel Reed to get going. And remember, this dude is a redshirt freshman. So playing in this kind of environment, it definitely had a big impact on how he played in this game. And Texas A&M, I thought they was going to be able to come back and win this game at one point. When they went into halftime and it was 2020, you were feeling really good about their chances. You felt like they could come in the second half, make some adjustments, clean up the missed tackles, but it just got worse. And worse and worse and worse as the game progressed to the point when you look at the final score, it's 44-20, and you were like, damn, at one point, you felt like A&M was going to be able to come back and win this game, but the slow start, when they got down 14-0, it just set the tone early. You knew how this thing was about to go because Lenore Sellers has not played as well as what he did tonight for the majority of this season. There was a point when after the Alabama game, South Carolina fans wanted this dude benched, but Shane Beamer, in spite of the criticism, still gave support for Lenore Sellers. He said, you know, this is a young quarterback. He has to continue to play so he can get better. It does us no good benching him when this is the future of our program. And tonight, Texas A&M and the rest of America got a glimpse of how good Lenore Sellers potentially could be in the near future if he's able to put it all together and have games like he had tonight consistently, because this dude was looking like Cam Newton 2.0 in his prime. This is a scary guy to see in the open field if you're a defensive back. Imagine you got to make an open field tackle on a dude that's 6'5", 6'4", that runs 4'4", and is 245 pounds of straight muscle. That's a scary mother effer to want to have to tackle in the open field. And it's no surprise that A&M lost tonight. And I picked South Carolina to win this game, but 15 minutes before kickoff, I just changed my mind for some strange reason. I just went ahead and took Texas A&M, and it cost me a lot of money because one thing that I learned is that when you're in the month of October, you never want to bet against the Beamer boys. This is one of those teams that they're not always what their record says they are. Yeah, they may have had a so-and-so record before this game got played, but if you look at the majority of their losses this year, some of them were fairly close, and if the ball would have bounced in a different direction, they would have won those games, and they possibly could have been a two-loss team. But for South Carolina, everything went right for you tonight, and everything that could have went wrong for A&M went wrong and then some. And it's no surprise that A&M now is 7-2, because when you are a team that kind of is heavily dependent on turnovers and your offense doesn't really have a lot of dynamic playmakers, you make a quarterback change after one great game, you know, things like this can happen when you go on the road in the SEC. Every given Saturday, any SEC team can lose on the road. Kirby Smart said it when Georgia barely beat Kentucky. We saw the same thing happen to Tennessee a few weeks ago when they lost on the road to Arkansas, and it turns out Arkansas isn't really good at all. So it just shows you how tough and how much of a jungle it is playing in the Southeastern Conference, man. You can't overlook anybody. And Mike Elko, it's not like he didn't have this team prepared. He knew this was going to be a tough game. He even said it all the days leading up to this game. He said this was going to be a scary opponent that A&M was going to have to play. You're riding off that emotional high, beating LSU. You're on top of the SEC standings, the front runner to make it to the conference championship, and then all of a sudden, you hit a brutal, I don't want to say brutal, but you get a brutal wake-up call from South Carolina that shows that A&M may not be as good as a team as what we initially thought they were after that loss against LSU. So for South Carolina, this was a statement win for Shane Beamer because there were a little bit of some talks and some smoke about, is he on the hot seat? You know, could South Carolina move on from him after the season? And the thing about Shane Beamer that really impresses me and why I like him so much as a coach is that anytime it seems like his back is against the wall, South Carolina always finds a way to turn the table. I remember in 2022 when they went on that run, they upset Tennessee, they ended their playoff hopes and destroyed Hendon Hooker's Heisman hopes as well and his draft stock. And then the week after that, they destroyed Clemson. So this is one of those programs that, you know, just because their record may say that they are a bad team, they may not be that good, you can't overlook these boys, man. I love watching the Beamer boys play. Special teams, defense, you know, all those things have been great for South Carolina this year, but their offense has been mildly inconsistent because when they have struggled to run the football and they've had to rely on Lenore Sellers to throw it to win, that's when they've gotten themselves in trouble. But tonight, they were able to pound the rock at will, and their defense was really effective at neutralizing Marcel Reed.